The Diadochi and the Legacy of Alexander. In the twilight of an era defined by the might of one man, Alexander the Great, the world stood poised on the precipice of change. His death, shrouded in mystery, cast a shadow over the vast empire he had forged through conquest and vision. With his passing, the realm once bound by his ambition now lay vulnerable, a tapestry of disparate lands and peoples awaiting the hands that would shape its destiny. The stage was set for the emergence of the Diadochi, those generals who had stood shoulder to shoulder with Alexander in the crucible of war, now tasked with inheriting his legacy. Among them, a cast of characters as diverse and complex as the lands they sought to rule. In the halls of Babylon, where Alexander had breathed his last, whispers of treachery mingled with the mournful lamentations of those who had once hailed him as their king. Ptolemy, the wily strategist, saw opportunity amidst the chaos, his mind already calculating the path to power that lay before him. Egypt, land of pharaohs and ancient wisdom, beckoned him with promises of sovereignty and riches untold. Across the vast expanse of Alexander's empire, other Diadochi plotted their own ascension. Seleucus, a man of boundless ambition and cunning intellect, turned his gaze eastward, his dreams of empire stretching across the vast plains of Mesopotamia and beyond. Cassander, rooted in the traditions of Macedon, sought to reclaim the glory of his homeland, his eyes fixed on the prize of Greece and the Balkans. Yet, amidst the machinations of these would-be rulers, one figure loomed larger than all others: Antigonus, the one-eyed general whose ferocity on the battlefield was matched only by his unyielding determination. To him, the dream of Alexander's empire was not merely a vision, but a birthright waiting to be claimed. With his loyal generals at his side and a formidable army at his command, as the Diadochi embarked on their quests for power, their ambitions clashed amidst the tumult of war and intrigue. Battles were fought, alliances forged and broken, and the fate of nations hung in the balance. Yet, amidst the chaos, the legacy of Alexander endured, a beacon of hope in a world fraught with uncertainty. In the heart of Alexandria, where the great library stood as a testament to the brilliance of Hellenistic culture, scholars and philosophers pondered the legacy of the man who had shaped their world. His conquests had brought together the disparate cultures of East and West, forging bonds that transcended borders and languages. His vision of a united empire, where the arts and sciences flourished alongside the spoils of war, had left an indelible mark on the world. As the Diadochi waged their wars and plotted their schemes, they carried with them the echoes of Alexander's triumphs and tragedies. Whether they would succeed in preserving his legacy or succumb to the same forces that had torn it asunder remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: the story of the Diadochi and the legacy of Alexander would echo through the annals of history for generations to come. The partition of Babylon. Once upon a time, in the ancient city of Babylon, where the Euphrates flowed lazily and the walls rose high and proud, a great conqueror lay on his deathbed. Alexander the Great, whose name echoed through the annals of history like thunder, was nearing the end of his journey. Surrounding him were his most trusted generals, the Diadochi, men who had shared in his triumphs and suffered through his trials. Among them was Ptolemy, whose mind churned with schemes even as his eyes glistened with feigned sorrow. He knew that with the passing of Alexander, an empire lay ripe for the taking.
As the last breath escaped Alexander's lips, the realm he had carved with sword and shield trembled on the brink of chaos. With no clear heir to the throne, the Diadochi's ambitions surged forth like a flood, each man hungry for power and glory.
Ptolemy wasted no time in seizing his chance. With the cunning of a fox and the patience of a spider, he slipped away to Egypt, where the ancient sands whispered secrets of pharaohs and kings. There, he began to weave his web of influence, ensnaring the hearts and minds of the Egyptian nobility with promises of wealth and power. Across the vast expanse of Alexander's empire, other Diadochi plotted their own ascension. Among them was Seleucus, a man of boundless ambition and keen intellect. While others bickered over the spoils of war, he cast his gaze eastward, to the lands of Persia and beyond. With the skill of a master diplomat, he forged alliances with the powerful satraps of the East, laying the groundwork for his own bid for greatness. Yet, amidst the chaos and intrigue, the legacy of Alexander endured. His conquests had brought together the disparate cultures of East and West, leaving an indelible mark on the world. In the heart of Babylon, where the great conqueror had drawn his final breath, the echoes of his triumphs and tragedies reverberated through the halls of power. As the Diadochi waged their wars and plotted their schemes, they carried with them the burden of Alexander's legacy, a legacy that would shape the course of history for centuries to come. And so, amidst the fractured dreams of empire, the true victor would be the one who could harness the power of the past to forge a new future. Rise of Antigonus. Once upon a time, in the turbulent aftermath of Alexander the Great's death, when the dust of conquest settled over his vast empire, a figure emerged from the chaos, casting a long shadow over the fractured lands. This was Antigonus, a man of iron will and unyielding ambition, whose name would become synonymous with both triumph and tragedy. Antigonus had risen from humble beginnings to become one of Alexander's most trusted generals, his loyalty forged in the crucible of battle and his skill honed on the fields of war. But with the passing of the great conqueror, Antigonus saw an opportunity to carve out a legacy of his own. As the other Diadochi squabbled over the spoils of Alexander's conquests, Antigonus bided his time, watching and waiting with the patience of a hunter stalking its prey. In his mind burned a vision of a united empire, where the strength of his sword and the wisdom of his rule would bring order to the chaos that gripped the world. With each passing day, Antigonus consolidated his power, winning the loyalty of his fellow generals with promises of glory and riches beyond imagination. His army swelled with recruits drawn by tales of his victories and the promise of spoils from the lands he sought to conquer. But Antigonus knew that to achieve his dreams, he would have to face formidable adversaries. Chief among them was the coalition of Diadochi who opposed his bid for supremacy, led by the likes of Ptolemy, Seleucus, and Cassander. These men saw in Antigonus a threat to their own ambitions, and they marshaled their forces to stop him at any cost. Yet, despite the odds stacked against him, Antigonus remained undaunted. With the confidence of a man who had stared death in the face and emerged unscathed, he prepared to lead his army into battle, determined to conquer or die trying. And so, amidst the gathering storm of war, the stage was set for the rise of Antigonus, a man whose name would be remembered long after the echoes of his triumphs and tragedies had faded into legend. Prelude to War, Rise of Antigonus. In the wake of Alexander the Great's death, the once unified empire trembled on the edge of chaos. Across the vast expanse of conquered lands, the Diadochi, Alexander's trusted generals, each harbored ambitions of their own. Among them stood Antigonus, a figure whose rise would shape the course of history. Antigonus, known as the One-Eyed for the battle scars that marked his face, was a veteran of countless campaigns. His loyalty to Alexander was unwavering, his skill in battle unmatched. But with the death of his king, Antigonus saw an opportunity to claim a legacy of his own. As the other Diadochi jockeyed for power, Antigonus quietly built alliances and strengthened his position. His reputation as a formidable commander drew warriors to his cause, while his charisma and cunning won the loyalty of his fellow generals. But Antigonus' ambitions extended far beyond mere conquest. In his mind burned a vision of a united empire, where the chaos of succession would give way to the order of his rule. With each passing day, his resolve grew stronger, his determination unshakable. Yet, looming on the horizon stood the coalition of Diadochi, who opposed him. Ptolemy in Egypt, Seleucus in the east, Cassander in Macedonia each saw Antigonus as a threat to their own aspirations. The stage was set for a clash of titans, a battle that would determine the fate of empires. As tensions mounted and alliances shifted, Antigonus prepared to make his move. With the sun at his back and the wind at his sails, he set forth on a campaign that would shake the foundations of the ancient world. And so began the prelude to war, the rise of Antigonus, a tale of ambition, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of power in a world forged by the fires of conquest. The coalition forms. In the aftermath of Alexander the Great's death, the once mighty empire he had forged lay fractured and vulnerable. Across the lands that had once bowed to his rule, the Diadochi, Alexander's generals, scrambled to claim their share of the spoils. But amidst the chaos, a new force began to coalesce, the coalition. It began with whispers in the corridors of power, as Ptolemy, the cunning strategist, reached out to his fellow Diadochi with a proposition. Together, he argued, they could stand against the rising tide of Antigonus' ambition and preserve the legacy of Alexander. In Egypt, Ptolemy marshaled his forces, his mind already calculating the strategic moves that would be required to outmaneuver their adversaries. Across the Mediterranean, Cassander, ruler of Macedonia, saw an opportunity to expand his own influence and joined the coalition without hesitation. But perhaps the most surprising ally came from the distant lands of the east. Seleucus, a man of ambition and cunning, recognized the threat that Antigonus posed to his own dreams of conquest and pledged his support to the coalition. As word spread of the coalition's formation, other Diadochi began to take notice. Lysimachus, ruler of Thrace, saw an opportunity to bolster his own position and threw his lot in with the coalition. Even in the heart of Antigonus' territory, dissent began to simmer as generals and satraps whispered of joining the coalition's cause. Yet, for all their strength in numbers, the coalition knew that their greatest challenge lay ahead. Antigonus, with his vast armies and indomitable will, would not be easily swayed. The stage was set for a conflict that would shake the ancient world to its core. And so, amidst the shifting sands of alliances and the clash of empires, the coalition formed a beacon of hope in a world gripped by uncertainty and strife. But whether they would succeed in their quest to thwart Antigonus' ambitions remained to be seen. The battle for strategic positioning, as the tensions between Antigonus and the coalition reached a boiling point, the stage was set for a pivotal moment in the Second War of the Diadochi. This moment came to be known as the battle for strategic positioning, where both sides engaged in a high-stakes game of chess, maneuvering their forces to gain the upper hand. Antigonus, with his unmatched military acumen, understood the importance of securing key positions on the battlefield. His scouts scoured the land, identifying strategic choke points and advantageous terrain. With meticulous precision, he deployed his troops, forming a defensive line that would be difficult for the coalition to breach. Meanwhile, the coalition, led by Ptolemy, Cassander, Seleucus, and Lysimachus, understood that they needed to outmaneuver Antigonus if they were to stand a chance of victory. With their forces assembled, they devised a daring plan to flank Antigonus' position and cut off his lines of communication. The stage was set for a clash of titans, as Antigonus and the coalition faced off on the field of battle. The sound of clashing swords and the thunder of hooves filled the air as both sides fought tooth and nail for control of the strategic positions that would determine the outcome of the war. For days, the battle raged on, with neither side willing to yield an inch of ground. Antigonus' forces held firm against the relentless assaults of the coalition, their disciplined ranks standing like an unbreakable wall against the tide of enemies that surged against them. But just when it seemed that all hope was lost, the coalition launched a daring flanking maneuver, catching Antigonus' forces off guard and threatening to envelop them from all sides. In a desperate bid to turn the tide, Antigonus ordered a counterattack, throwing his reserves into the fray with reckless abandon. The clash was brutal and unforgiving, with the fate of empires hanging in the balance. Yet, in the end, it was the coalition who emerged victorious, their bold maneuvering and unwavering determination carrying the day. The battle for strategic positioning had been won, but the war was far from over. Antigonus, blooded but unbowed, retreated to lick his wounds and plan his next move, while the coalition celebrated their hard-fought victory and prepared for the battles yet to come. The Battle of Gabiene, Clash of Titans. In the shadow of the towering mountains of Gabiene, the fate of empires hung in the balance as Antigonus, the one-eyed, and the coalition of Diadochi clashed in a titanic struggle for supremacy. The Battle of Gabiene, a clash of titans, would go down in history as one of the most decisive engagements of the Second War of the Diadochi. Antigonus, with his seasoned veterans and formidable cavalry, stood resolute against the onslaught of the coalition forces led by Ptolemy, Cassander, Seleucus, and Lysimachus. The plains of Gabiene became a battlefield, where the clash of steel and the cries of warriors echoed across the land. With the sun at their backs and the wind in their sails, both sides charged headlong into the fray, their banners fluttering defiantly in the breeze. The ground shook beneath the thundering hooves of charging cavalry, while the air was rent with the clash of swords and the roar of battle. For hours, the battle raged on, neither side willing to yield an inch of ground. Antigonus, with his unmatched military prowess, unleashed wave after wave of ferocious assaults, determined to break the coalition's resolve and secure victory for himself. But the coalition, with their unwavering determination and sheer numbers, refused to be cowed. Led by their fearless generals, they stood firm against the onslaught, rallying their troops with cries of defiance and courage. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the battlefield, the tide of battle began to turn. The coalition, emboldened by their leader's unwavering resolve, launched a daring counterattack, catching Antigonus' forces off guard and driving them back in disarray. In the end, it was the coalition who emerged victorious, their indomitable spirit and steadfast determination carrying the day. The Battle of Gabiene had been won, but the war was far from over. Antigonus, blooded but unbowed, retreated to lick his wounds and plan his next move, while the coalition celebrated their hard-fought victory and prepared for the battles yet to come. Reorganization and reinforcement. In the aftermath of the decisive Battle of Gabiene, both Antigonus and the coalition of Diadochi found themselves at a critical juncture in the Second War of the Diadochi. With the dust of battle settling and the echoes of clashing steel fading into memory, the time had come for reorganization and reinforcement. Antigonus, though dealt a bitter blow in defeat, was not one to be easily deterred. With the resilience of a seasoned warrior, he withdrew his battered forces to regroup and lick their wounds. In the quiet solitude of his war tent, he pondered his next move, knowing that the fate of his ambitions hung in the balance. Meanwhile, the coalition, buoyed by their hard-won victory at Gabiene, seized the opportunity to consolidate their gains and reinforce their armies for the battles yet to come. Ptolemy, Cassander, Seleucus, and Lysimachus, the leaders of the coalition, convened to strategize their next steps, their minds sharp and their resolve unshakable. With the fate of empires hanging in the balance, both sides embarked on a frenzy of activity. Antigonus, ever the master tactician, began to reorganize his forces, shoring up his defenses and bolstering his ranks with fresh recruits drawn from the far reaches of his domain. The coalition, meanwhile, spared no effort in reinforcing their armies and solidifying their alliances. Troops were mustered, supplies stockpiled, and battle plans drawn up with meticulous precision. Each general knew that the road ahead would be fraught with peril, but they were united in their determination to see their cause through to the end. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the tension between Antigonus and the coalition reached a fever pitch. Both sides knew that the next battle would be decisive, that the fate of Alexander's empire hung in the balance. And so, amidst the reorganization and reinforcement of their armies, Antigonus and the coalition of Diadochi prepared for the battles yet to come, their destinies intertwined in the crucible of war. The Second War of the Diadochi was far from over, and the stage was set for the ultimate showdown between titans. The coalition's advance. As the coalition of Diadochi emerged victorious from the Battle of Gabiene, their spirits soared, emboldened by the taste of triumph and the promise of further conquests. The momentum of their advance surged forward, propelling them deeper into Antigonus' territory with each passing day. With Ptolemy, Cassander, Seleucus, and Lysimachus at the helm, the coalition's forces marched with a newfound sense of purpose and determination. Their victories at Gabiene had bolstered their confidence and solidified their resolve to end Antigonus' bid for supremacy once and for all. Across the rugged terrain of the ancient world, the coalition's armies pressed on, leaving a trail of triumph and devastation in their wake. Towns and cities fell before their relentless advance, their banners flying proudly as they marched ever closer to their ultimate goal. But Antigonus, the one-eyed, was not one to be underestimated. Despite the setbacks he had suffered at Gabiene, his spirit remained unbroken, his determination unwavering. With the cunning of a fox and the ferocity of a lion, he marshaled his forces to meet the coalition head-on, determined to halt their advance and reclaim his lost territories. And so, amidst the dust and chaos of the ancient world, the coalition's advance continued unabated. Each victory brought them one step closer to their ultimate goal, while each defeat only served to strengthen their resolve. The fate of empires hung in the balance as they marched ever forward, their eyes fixed on the horizon, and the promise of victory that lay beyond. The rise of the Seleucids. Once upon a time, in the wake of Alexander the Great's death, the vast empire he had forged lay fractured and vulnerable. Amidst the chaos of succession, one man saw an opportunity to carve out a legacy of his own. This man was Seleucus, a cunning and ambitious general whose dreams of greatness knew no bounds. With the death of Alexander, Seleucus found himself at a crossroads. Like many of his fellow Diadochi, he harbored ambitions of ruling over vast territories and commanding the loyalty of countless subjects. But unlike the others, Seleucus possessed the vision and determination to see his dreams through to fruition. As the other Diadochi squabbled over the spoils of Alexander's conquests, Seleucus quietly began to lay the groundwork for his own bid for power. In the ancient lands of the East, where the sun rose over the towering mountains and the sands stretched as far as the eye could see, he found fertile ground for his ambitions. With the skill of a master diplomat, Seleucus forged alliances with the powerful satraps and nobles of Persia and Media, winning their loyalty with promises of wealth and glory. He knew that to succeed in his quest for power, he would need allies who shared his vision and were willing to fight alongside him. But Seleucus was not content to merely rule over a single kingdom. His ambitions reached far beyond the borders of his own domain, stretching across the vast expanse of Alexander's empire and beyond. With each passing day, his influence grew, his power expanding like the rising sun. And so, amidst the chaos and uncertainty of the ancient world, the rise of the Seleucids began. Led by the indomitable spirit and unwavering determination of Seleucus, they emerged as a force to be reckoned with, their banner flying proudly over the lands they had conquered. But the road to greatness would not be an easy one. Along the way, Seleucus would face countless challenges and obstacles, from rival generals to rebellious subjects. Yet through it all, he would remain steadfast in his resolve, his eyes fixed firmly on the horizon and the promise of a brighter future that lay beyond. The continuing struggle for supremacy. As the years passed and the echoes of conquest faded into memory, the struggle for supremacy among the Diadochi continued unabated. Though Seleucus had risen to prominence and established the mighty Seleucid Empire, the dream of a united empire remained elusive, forever out of reach. Despite his best efforts, Seleucus found himself locked in a never-ending cycle of conflict and intrigue, as rival generals and ambitious warlords vied for control of the ancient world. Battles were fought, alliances forged and broken, and the fate of nations hung in the balance as the struggle for supremacy raged on. Yet amidst the chaos and uncertainty, the legacy of Alexander endured. His vision of a united empire, where Greek culture intertwined with the traditions of the East, lived on in the hearts and minds of his successors. The great cities he had founded, Alexandria, Antioch, Pergamon, stood as monuments to his greatness, beacons of civilization in a world plagued by war and strife. And so, as the sun set on the ancient world and the shadows lengthened across the land, the struggle for supremacy among the Diadochi continued. Each general fought for his own vision of greatness, each kingdom vying for its place in the annals of history. But amidst the chaos and turmoil, there remained a glimmer of hope, a hope that one day, the dream of a united empire would be realized, and peace would reign once more. Until that day came, the struggle for supremacy would continue, a never-ending saga of ambition, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of power in a world forged by the fires of conquest.